Ragnvaldr, Aldegard's fiercest son, is the fourth and final playable character in Fear and Hunger. An intimidating figure for sure. Seems like even a northern brute like him can appreciate finesse and knowledge. Ragnvaldr was born with the Tormented Soul. People with the Tormented Soul seem destined to go through constant hardship and strife, though unlike Ranjambara, whose reaction to this is to write poetry and listen to My Chemical Romance, Ragnvaldr's torment forged him into one of the world's greatest warriors, with a mental fortitude only rivaled by the very gods themselves. He's known as the Outlander, and all that most people know about him is that he's a scion of Aldegard, the northern kingdom that has stayed independent for the most part. Known for their iron will and advanced ships that sail even to the most western of continents. Aldegard is a cruel yet beautiful land, and its people are amongst the world's toughest. Ragnvaldr had a relatively normal childhood, living in Aldegard's main city, where his father taught him the art of war, with Ragnvaldr taking to the bow and arrow more than anything else, which he demonstrates numerous times during his travels through the dungeon. Ragnvaldr would settle down and have a family, though Aldegard would be beset by famine, and in their desperation the men of Aldegard would sail to Vinland, the cursed continent in the far west, where monsters roam, with the hope that they may be able to find a new food source. The voyage was long and cruel. The weak succumbed to the conditions, and the strong eventually made it to Vinland. It's whispered that the survivors, including Ragnvaldr, embraced cannibalism to survive, but the man himself would never admit to it, and a wise man would not broach the subject with the giant of Aldegard. Their time in Vinland would prove fruitless. The land could not be sowed, and the men began to lose their minds. They pillaged the lands and stole artifacts they had no business to touch. One of the men, possibly the captain, found there the Cube of the Depths. Ragnvaldr himself knew the cube bore ill omen, but couldn't argue against the object returning with them, and it wouldn't be long before the cube brought calamity to his home. The Midnight Suns, led by Legard, massacred Ragnvaldr's village, putting all to the sword, including the women and children. What is this? Ulvi, are you still alive? Ragnvaldr, you came. They came while you were gone. Those knights. Who were they? The Knights of the Midnight Sun. Knights of the Midnight Sun? The pretty man, with the locks of a fair maiden. The captain, he wanted what we brought from Vinland. I think I'm going to sleep now. Ulve, rest in peace. Hild, Bjorn. This can't be. Unforgivable. Unforgivable. Hildi and Bjorn are Ragnvaldr's wife and son respectively, and their deaths are the reason the Outlander travels to the Dungeon of Fear and Hunger in the first place, with two objectives in mind: retrieve the cube and avenge his family. Throughout the dungeon we'll encounter Ragnvaldr a few times. The first is in the book passage courtyard. I see. Seems like you still retain your sanity. In a way it's reassuring to see that I'm not completely alone here. Tell me, are you evil? No? Only time will tell. You'd be surprised what you're truly capable of once you stay long enough here. But your presence here just means these dungeons will claim one more victim, and the evil residing here will grow that much stronger. If I were you, I'd try to escape these ancient walls by any means necessary. For your sake, I hope our paths don't cross again. Stay cautious in the dungeons. The evil in this place is of a pure kind. It's not here just to torment us. It's not here to spread its roots into the surrounding world, even if the dungeon's vile traps and decrepit monsters would lead you to believe otherwise. Its interests are already past this world, and this place is a mere relic from its long history. You seem familiar with this evil. Yes, my kind, the northern people of Oldergard. We found the dark continents of Vinland from the far reaches of the west. The moment you lay your eyes on the crooked mountains and the twisted forests of those lands, you feel the presence of a greater evil. It's that same evil that resides here. Who are you? You can call me Ragnvaldr. I'm from the north, from the kingdom of Oldergard. Maybe it's safer together. No doubt it would be for you, but for the time being I won't be traveling with you. Why are you here? I'm here to find a relic that a certain person took from my people. This man is imprisoned somewhere down below. Here we meet a man who is clearly confident and strong, but not lacking in wisdom or mercy. He fires a warning shot at us, and given the circumstances of the dungeon, it's actually fair enough that he would at least fire a warning shot. Afterwards, he's willing to have a conversation and divulges information to the player quite freely. We can meet him again in the thicket. Oh, you again. You're still alive. I guess I misjudged you previously. This place is truly curious, isn't it? They say these are the intestines of the god of the depths. That means we are inside an older god, the god of the depths. He is not that well known a god, as he is mostly worshipped by those who are forsaken and forgotten. His people often shy away from the light and prefer dark corners of the earth. Have you seen the cave dwellers yet? They prove my point quite well. The god of the depths is responsible for the layout of these dungeons. He is ever changing his shape to challenge the visitors. I'd try to please him if I were to delve deeper. Have you found what you're looking for? Nich. Not yet. There is a man imprisoned somewhere in these dungeons. The man has something that shouldn't belong to any human. I'm here to retrieve it, and perhaps get rid of the man while at it. He carries an ominous energy with him. I'm not sure what to think of him. Would you like to join my party? Maybe I will, actually. There is clearly more to you than what I initially expected, so it'd be an honor to crawl these dungeons with you. He's not as hostile here, and will even be open to joining the player on their quest, and offers advice to us about appealing to the god of the depths, if we wish to travel deeper. If you're playing as Ragnvaldr, you can kill Legard in his cell, or if you have Legard and Ragnvaldr in your party and enter Mahab, Rags will beat Legard to death with his bare hands. That's some Viking behaviour. If you sit on the Throne of Ascension and find yourself in the Void, you can locate the man, who's sitting by a fire, as though this is just another camping trip far from home for him. He is surprisingly self-aware and introspective, admitting that he may be going mad, and that he's losing hope. He'll rejoin your party without a thought as you continue your journey. The Ragnvaldr we meet in the game is a strong, confident warrior who remains calm even in the most severe of situations, though beneath Ragnvaldr's relative friendliness lies a deep, unyielding rage. In his quest, Ragnvaldr arrives at the dungeon after the slaughter of his people, two objectives in mind: find and secure the Cube of the Depths, and avenge his family. Entering the dungeon, he quickly comes to realize that the dungeon has been overwhelmed by Depths' corruption, and decides to slay the Depth God's most powerful champions, because he wasn't busy enough already, apparently. He has 12 targets on his list, not including Legard, and the only way to stop him is to kill him. His first prey is the Cave Mother. Not much is really known about her. We can infer that she was once a woman just based on her humanoid appearance. I suspect she may also be a marriage, based on this little guy's face here. She seems to now be a servant of the Depth God, and potentially kidnaps men to impregnate her, and spawn her infernal cave gnomes. Now, Rags probably could choose to mate with her, but instead, understandably, he chooses violence, collecting her soul. If equipped, it gives the player a boost to their main attack stat. The Ragnvaldr spits on your weak-ass buff, 1 down. an ancient being that swims in the underground waterways. There are many human legends which mention this beast as well. His next victim is the salmon snake, a creature that guards Nosramis's secret lab. His other secret lab. It's probably the closest thing that the fungal world has to a dragon. If you feed it the eggs of the cave mother, it will be pacified for a turn, meaning you can kill it without suffering damage. Its inclusion here is pretty interesting. It's unknown who exactly it owes its allegiance to, if anyone, but it seems that Fear and Hunger's world, dragons once flew in the sky, though now they're deformed, wingless serpents, hiding in the dark. Its soul prevents the player from suffering limb loss and bleeding. 2 down. The poor creature wants to get the gift of the god of the depths. He was once persuaded by the king of insects. Needless to say that his pursuits are in vain. Next we have the butterfly, seemingly a former guard or prisoner of the dungeon. He's a passive opponent, and not much in a fight. If you destroy the depth god's heart, you can collect the butterfly's soul without having to fight him. And upon doing so, you actually hear the flap of wings, implying that he's alive and is just actually transformed into a butterfly somehow. His soul increases the player's evasion by 50%. 3 down. Though it's best to save him for after you visited Mahab. Bye. As things started to succumb to chaos in the dungeons of Fear and Hunger, he was sent from the kingdom of Rondon for aid. In short time, he too lost his mind. Now he tries to guard the area to his last breath from anyone who sets foot to the fortress. Iron Shakespeare, like Rags, is a notable warrior who came to the dungeon recently. Unlike Rags, he succumbed to the darkness. Unlike most enemies in the game, his torso is his weakest point. After killing him, poking his armor reveals it to be hollow. What happened to the body of Iron Shakespeare is difficult to say. Perhaps when he was transformed, his body and armor became one and the same. His soul provides a defense buff, not like we need it. He was set on purifying the dungeons from filth and depravity. Little did he know that he would become a part of the dark himself. The Crow Mauler can kill your run if you're not prepared. To fight him, it's best you bring a red vial, Isaiah's mask, and some kind of attack that does a set amount of burn or poison damage each turn. But even then, there's a risk. Something could go awry. You have to kill him before you enter Mahab. Otherwise he'll despawn, meaning he's the only opponent in the game you have to face before you've had a chance to loot the entire dungeon. Killing him, you obtain the Crow's Emblem Key, which you can use to obtain Miasma, and I do think that also speaks to what happens to the Crow Mauler in the actual story. But that's another story for another time. In any case, we butcher the beta bird and obtain its soul, which gives us an attack multiplier.
Remember, Sally, when I promised to kill you last?
That's right, Major. You did.
I lied.
5 down. Now we enter Mahab. He is a human that was lost to blood magic. The darkness has had its way with him. He is but a slave to Grogorath. The Black Witch is interestingly enough not a servant for the depth god at all, unlike all of our previous foes, but he rather serves Grogorath. We can meet him very early in the game where he pulls us into a dream world and uses our lack of experience to dispatch us quickly. Though if you kill him in the dream, you can't trap its soul, so you have to deal with it in the Grand Library of Mahab, where it lingers in the dusty corridors of the Enlightened One. It's also interesting that Rags isn't discriminating between servants of Depths or Grogorath. If you're corrupted, he's the cure, motherfucker. Killing him, we get his soul. 6 down. Our next target is the Fellowship. I'm covering them pretty extensively in the next video, so I'm not going to really talk about them too much here. Their souls don't really do anything. Faultiel and the Skin Granny can be run killers if you're not careful, so if you can, I'd suggest using an empty scroll to obtain their souls, and skip the fights altogether. But that's only a suggestion for the mere mortals in the audience. The god of ultraviolence eats grifters like these clowns for breakfast. 10 down. Our next opponent is the White Angel of the Tormented One. You think you have problems. These guys have to help Ron edit his poetry. Won't somebody have mercy? Don't worry, the Outlander is here now. In Termina we seemingly get some gruesome insight into how a being can be created. It involves chains, screaming, cocoons, and great clothes at reasonable prices. Its soul allows us to attack twice per turn, as if Rags wasn't OP enough, 11 down. The figurine, created by the older gods to protect the Golden Temple of the true king. He has seen millennia go by, but still the fool waits for a false prophecy. Finally, we have the Old Guardian, the protector of Mahab. As you can tell from the state of the place, he was terrible at his job. The Guardian statues were seemingly created by Ulmer and await the return of the god. But Ulmer is dead. You can find his body lying motionless in a tomb in the year 809, which is a skeleton by the year 1590. The Old Guardian, like Rags, is a great warrior, and he stands as a warning to the Outlander that you need to let go of things and move on. Nobody likes a simp, Rags. Anyway, we claim our final soul, 12 down. You have now slain every beast and creature that had a corrupted soul. The man you came to these dungeons for seems to be dead, and you also found the stolen artifact, the Cube of the Depths. You have achieved everything you set out to do. It might be better to leave now, while you are still capable. Ragnvaldr slays all of these foes, and seals their souls into stones. The fights are brutal, and a misstep in one can be a disaster. In hardcore mode, you can't save, so when you die it's a complete reset. His quest is the ultimate demonstration of a player's skill at that point. I can't tell you how many attempts it took me to do it. I genuinely lost count. With these foes slain and the cube secure, Ragnvaldr has one final mission here. He leaves the dungeon, but not before entering the guard's cell, to look upon the supposed man of prophecy one last time, before he takes his leave. His throat is cut open. He has been dead for a while. This is the man you came here for. He is dead, so you cannot exactly extract your revenge. Still, it does not satisfy you, knowing that he had a miserable end in these dungeons. You got everything you came for. The captain of the cursed mercenary army was dead, and you got the unholy artifact back. You also made sure that the evil that lurked in the darkness was vanquished. You slaughtered every single creature that held true power in the dungeons. However, you know the darkness doesn't end in the dungeons. You've witnessed the same evil in the faraway continent of Vinland, and that same corrupting force lurks in every dark corner of the world. It is restless. It is relentless. For you to stop it from spreading, you also need to be restless and relentless. From the moment you escaped the dungeons of Fear and Hunger, you dedicated your life in hunting down those that are conceived by the darkness. You would hunt down all the macabre beasts that hid from the eyes of the oblivious Western world. The beasts would come to know your name. There's a certain bleakness to completing Ragnvaldr's quest. The Rags of the S-Quest is a blunt instrument, a man driven by vengeance, who is merciless to all who dwell in the dark, regardless of their own personal intentions or alignment. A creature like the Old Guardian, for example, is more sad and tragic than dangerous. And he's a servant of Ulmer, not any of the other twisted gods. Rags is somewhat reminiscent of Conan from the Howard Pulp stories, in that both are lone noble warriors who battle gods and monsters. Though Conan fights to build a kingdom, Ragnvaldr does the same thing to avenge one. Ian, Shakespeare and Rudemer are fellow warriors, men who thought they could take on the dark, and they failed. So what makes Ragnvaldr any different? You know, besides having that jawline. Rags is a man who lost everything, and actually has more in common with his foes than I think he'd like to admit. And I wonder if this ever dawned on him over the course of his adventure, and if he'd embrace mercy at some point. The manga Berserk inspired Fear and Hunger to some extent, if Lagarde wasn't obvious of that. And one of the main themes of Berserk is whether its protagonist Guts is just as, if not more monstrous than the demons he hunts, with Guts being depicted as a beast in certain panels of the manga. And I'm not saying Ragnvaldr is based on Guts, I just wonder if he would have a similar arc to the Demon Slayer. The Ragnvaldr outside of his main quest is somewhat similar in characterization, especially when it comes to his overwhelming hatred for the god, though he will at times demonstrate a certain kindness, whether that be offering the player advice, keeping a cool head in the voice, or in his conversation with Das about the Maiden of the Depths. He gives credence to her notion that the story could be true. I personally don't think the Outlander goes down a path of destruction. His journey definitely starts there, don't get me wrong, but I'm not convinced that's where it ends. The dungeon is filled with fallen warriors who are either corrupted or overwhelmed. The spectral assassin, the old knight, Iron Shakespeare, the owner of Blue Sin, even Rudimer is noted as being a tough warrior, and all were eventually overwhelmed, so clearly pure martial prowess alone isn't enough to overcome the darkness. In my video about the Depth God, I proposed that he was a god of passive nihilism. The game in general has themes of nihilism, with the game giving you constant text prompts imploring you to give up, saying things like you realized you delved too deep, and blank is always an option. And while Rags' S-ending is certainly a lonely, violent, nihilistic journey, the Rags we meet in the dungeon isn't such a hopeless case. Even when you play as the man and murder Lagarde in its cell, Rags will have this internal monologue. The man is still alive. The man who ravaged your lands. The man who pillaged your family. Kill him. Your rage grows ever higher. You feel your blood boil. It thirsts for justice. You assure yourself that this needs to be done. This man is an evil being. He does not deserve to see the light of the sun ever again. You embrace the rage. Having Das in your party will result in a fight breaking out. It is done. All life has left his body. You murdered a helpless man. That Ragnvaldr can be capable of such self-reflective moral assessment is indicative of the fact that he hasn't fully embraced nihilistic violence. And like Das, I think his is a journey of existentialism, where his sense of honour and strength is challenged by the horrors of the dungeon, and a man with a new moral code is formed. I actually think in the game's story it's Rags who unites the party, saving Gahara and Das and being the only one who Enki can have a somewhat decent conversation with. But I'll probably go into more detail on that in my full story video. Regardless, I think Ragnvaldr's story is about staring into the abyss, and finding a sliver of hope inside of it. In Termina, we do have some confirmation that Ragnvaldr survived his journey to the dungeon. We meet August, who has a stunning resemblance to the guy, and he's also from Oldegard. He also has all the special class skills that Rags had as well, and he fights with a bow. Oh, and he has a beef with Lagarde, for some reason, and seemingly has anti-magic arrows, which only seem to have been created specifically for the purpose of killing Lagarde. We also meet Moonless again. She's still a good dog. A little bigger though. When we encounter her, a fight breaks out, and if August is still alive at that point, he'll stop the fight between you. Hold it, I'll take care of her. Easy, girl. Easy. You did good. Those ones are not the enemy, they're friends. She is an old family acquaintance. She doesn't mean harm. I hope you're not hurt too badly. Moonless's inclusion also gives us a few more clues as to what Rags got up to in the dungeon. On her back are impaled the swords Miasma and Eastern Wind. Miasma is one of the game's best weapons, and it can only be obtained by killing the Crowmauler. Remember that creepy door from my Dungeons video? Yeah, the Crowmauler has the key to it, go figure. Miasma is an evil weapon, whispering in the character's ear, imploring them to embrace their madness and kill. The idea of a sword that corrupts the soul and mind of its user isn't a new one. It's also somewhat reminiscent of the Beast of Darkness from Berserk, which is something of an internal antagonist to Guts. And I could see a similar dynamic between Rags and Miasma playing out in the dungeon. What makes Miasma unique to Cursed Blades from other games though is the game's mind mechanic. Your mind drops below a certain level, the character has a chance in certain locations to waking up to this scene. Moonless also dropped Eastern Steel, so Ragnvaldr likely obtained that as well at some point. It seems that after his adventure in the dungeon, the Outlander dedicated his life to raising a family, with the purpose at some point of one day combating Lagarde. August will even allude to this, if you should catch him at the right moment. Would you mind if I entertained you with a story? Sure. There once was a time of great turmoil. The world had been in a state of constant conflict and sickness for as long as people remembered. People blamed all the possible powers above them, the kings and sultans of the time, the so-called new gods, the gods of old. Everything but themselves. Not that different from the times we live in as we speak. It was almost a breaking point for the entire civilized world. It would have been just that, if it wasn't for the glimmer of hope at the end of the tunnel. There was a prophecy about a man with golden locks that would shepherd mankind out of the darkness. It just so happened that a man with similar features was rising up in fame in Central Europa. The man promised a just world, one where the corrupted royalty and the old world order would come crumbling down. The ones who held too tight to the old world would feel it in their skin. But the hierarchy of the old world would not be shaken with mere words. The man had to find strength that would outmatch the vast armies of the kings and sultans of the old kingdom. That kind of strength is not easy to come by, so he did anything and everything it took to get that very power. He made a lot of villainous moves to pursue his agenda. One could say he came close to the same evil he promised to crush, constantly assuring himself that the ends justify the means. Ultimately, the man did get the strength he so yearned. But at what cost? In his pursuit, he fed the darkness of the world, enough so that a new deity was born, the god of fear and hunger. People would fall for this new deity in masses, most likely because she was a creation of their own, a manifestation of their own misery. Misery and hardship often create kinship. At the very least, the god of fear and hunger didn't represent the old world order. That's what mattered the most. Anything was better in their eyes than what had led the world to that point. Regardless, people found a new direction, and that didn't end up being the prophesized man. The man did re-emerge from the darkness, but by then the world had already found a new savior from the deity. As his pursuits turned out to be meaningless, he slowly started to spiral into madness. His frustrations would slowly show themselves in rising hostility and violence. Without the grand ends he envisioned, he only came to be known for his means. Ultimately, he became known as the Yellow King of Madness, finalizing his transformation into a true villain. The tale doesn't end there though, even if its lessons learned moment has gone by long ago. They say that in his madness, the man believed his own prophecy, to the point that it would not let him die until he would fulfill that destiny. A prophecy can be like Chekhov's gun. It has to be fulfilled before things can be laid to rest. He would wander the earth in pursuit of the greater good. You think he'll finally get his happy ending? I actually do think that Ragnvaldr interacts with the god during his stay in the dungeon, though I don't think it ends with the god's death. Call me optimistic, but I don't think Ragnvaldr leaves the dungeon a monster himself, or a so-called god of ultraviolence. He's a proficient killer, nobody can deny that, but that's not all he is. Talking to him, we discover a man of passion. He has a love for his home, for Oldegard, and he doesn't even outright hate the darkness. He views it, and by extension the depth god, as evil, but will also suggest to the player that they boost their affinity with the god, as having its favour may aid them in going deeper, showing that he's not just a mindless, bloodthirsty barbarian, or even a zealot. He's quite a pragmatist. And he's also honourable. He fires a warning arrow before initiating conversation with the player, which is a fair thing to do given the context they're in, which is why I think Ragnvaldr's killing of the guards in his cell isn't canon, nor is the ending of Rags becoming a god of ultraviolence, which is why I think the ultraviolence ending isn't really the canon one. I think it gets pretty close to the heart. I wouldn't say he doesn't go around murdering the world's monsters after this, but I don't think he does it in a blind fury. He's a barbarian, but his wisdom on matters of the old gods is only matched by anger, and his willingness to confront the dark is admirable. And I think he survives with a perspective closer to Nosramis's, more than anybody else's. But the Depth God isn't the only old god active in the dungeon, nor the only god we can meet. and we'll confront some of them next time.